listening to their testimony of actually how they ended up meeting each other, and it was fantastic because y'all added how you came to Torah in your story. So this is going to be a little different. This really isn't going to be an interview. I'm just going to hand it over to y'all and let you tell your story as you did the other morning. So I really appreciate y'all being on here, very humbled, and I know everybody will be very moved by y'all's story.
Thank you.
So, right there.
So my journey towards Torah and towards marrying this amazing man, uh, I'm going to say it began at birth because I really believe that Yahweh's hand was in the mix from the moment I was conceived. My parents had been told that they could not have any more children. I have two older brothers, and my mother and father had conceived a third time, and they lost the child. And in losing the child, my mother lost one of her fallopian tubes, and the other tube, they tied it, split the ends, and burnt it so that she could never conceive again because they told her it would be too dangerous for her to even try. And she said that she believed in her heart that Yahweh would open the door for her to have another child. And so they tried, and 7 years after that medical procedure, I was born, which is why they named me Joy, because they were so overwhelmingly happy to be able to have another child, despite all of that. And so you would think that from the beginning I would have felt completely loved by the Father, um, and that I would have grown up spiritually minded. But as a child, I didn't necessarily feel loved by the Father because I now understand that I saw Yahweh through the filter of my human father. I saw him in the image of my human dad, whom I adored. What little girl doesn't love her dad?
Right.
And I had in me, though, and I believe the Father put it there, just an intense desire to know God, an intense desire. So my parents stopped going to church when I was 5, and I would walk to neighborhood churches by myself. Any church that I could find that was within a few blocks of my home, I would walk over and try to learn some things. And so one of the defining times for me spiritually was a time when I was 5 years old, and my father had his own demons to overcome,
Right.
and his own challenges with gambling, chronic gambling, and anger issues. And he had an affinity for guns.
Mm.
And especially when he felt out of control in a situation or he get very angry, he would grab a gun. And so on this particular day, I was going to a neighborhood vacation Bible school in the evenings. And as I said, I was 5. And I remember hearing my parents yelling and screaming as I was taking my bath to get ready for Bible school. And um, so I remember washing very slowly, thinking, if I'm so quiet, they'll stop arguing. If I'm quiet, the house will be still. And so eventually the yelling stopped. So I thought, oh, this must be a good thing. So I got out of the bathtub and dried off and put on my little dress. And I poked my head around the corner into the living room. And there my father sat holding a rifle. And my mother and her best friend, his cousin, were sitting opposite him in chairs. And everyone was silent. And I realized, even in my 5-year-old mind, that he was holding them hostage. And so I still quietly finished getting dressed and figured, okay, I'll just walk right out the front door. I will cross the living room, pass right between them, and walk out. So as I was walking out, he stopped me and he said, where do you think you're going? And my mom spoke up for me and she said, let the child go to Bible study. It's important to her. Let her go. And so my father said, okay. So I walked out of the house, but my heart was racing. I knew I was free. I was out of harm's way, but my mother was not. And so I thought, I've got to tell somebody. I've got to let someone know that my mom is in danger. And so as I passed the next door neighbor's house, she asked me, she said, Joy, where's your mom? And I said, oh, she's sitting in the living room. And I'm from a Southern family. And, in my household, you don't just sit in the living room unless
Right.
it's a special occasion. It's not an area where you play. It's not an area where you hang out. It is the formal living room. with plastic on the seats. So I said, oh, she's sitting in the living room. My neighbor said, the living room? Why is she doing that? And I said, oh, she's probably just looking at daddy's gun. And in my 5-year-old mind, that was me saying, hey, can you get some help? But instead of going for help, my next door neighbor called my father. And she said, Albert, what's going on over there? Joy says that you've got a gun. And I want to know what's going on.
Oh no.
So he said, send her home. So my neighbor sent me back home. And my father quietly called me over to him. And he grabbed me. I had long, long ponytails. And he grabbed me by my hair and wrapped his hand in my ponytail and yanked me onto the floor. And he cocked the rifle and pressed it to my temple. And he said, if you ever go outside of my house and tell another GD thing, I swear to God, I'll blow your brains out.
Mm.
And as I sat there on the floor with the rifle pressed against my temple, and I remember so clearly that it was cold for a long time and then it felt warm, I felt calm. And I remember thinking, focusing my mind not on that moment, that situation, but I remember thinking, I want to go to Bible study tonight because it's lemon cookie night and my mama never buys lemon cookies. I've got to make it to those lemon cookies. But I sat there next to him on the floor and I hummed hymns to myself quietly. And he sat there with that rifle cocked against my temple for about 4 hours before he got tired and said, you all can go. And that night, he worked an overnight shift. And that night when he went to work, my mother packed us up and we went to stay with my grandmother. And I remember her saying as she drove away, I don't think he'll ever hurt us intentionally, but one of these days he'll have an accident and it'll be too late. One of those guns will go off and it'll be too late. And so we fled. But even in that moment, I felt like Yahweh was building my faith and drawing me to him, because even through me humming hymns and keeping my mind focused on wanting to get to Bible study, it kept me calm. And I had a sense of peace from that. And to this day, when I find myself feeling fearful without even realizing I'm doing it, I catch myself humming hymns, because that's what gives my spirit peace. But Yahweh saw me through that childhood, and what Satan intended to be horrible times were great times for me. Living at my grandmother's house was a safe place, and it was a happy time. I got to be around my cousins, and so even in the midst of what would have been just a horribly painful situation, I was able to feel joyful and have the joy of having a childhood. And so I went off to college at an elite university, and people outside of me would have thought, oh man, her life is great. She's got it all together. She's got the life, a 19, 18-year-old would want. But I was miserable inside.
Right.
I I prayed often, but I saw Yahweh as a mean dad who only wanted to punish me when I did wrong. I didn't have a concept of how much he loved me. And so it was very hard for me to make a heart level connection. Who wants to be close to someone who's mad at them all the time?
Right.
Who doesn't love them, or who I thought didn't love me. And so in not being able to feel his love and to understand his love, I was miserable. And all of my young adulthood, my teen years, I used to think, I just want to change the world. And I reached a point where I felt like I can't change the world, and I don't feel loved, and I feel so profoundly alone. And in that moment, I felt like my life had no value. And so I had made a decision to end my life. I went and bought the perfect death outfit. You don't want to be caught dead in a shabby outfit. So I went and bought my all white perfect outfit and laid it out on my bed, and I cleaned up my dorm room really well, and wrote what I intended to be a final letter to my family. And I knew nothing. I had never smoked or been drunk, so I knew nothing about, how does one end her life, like what do I do? So I did research and learned, there were some pills that I could take that were over-the-counter pills, but if I took too many, etc., that it would end my life. And so I went and bought these pills, and I laid everything out, and I prayed what I intended to be one final prayer. And my prayer was, Father, I feel like my life has no meaning and my life has no value, and I'm miserable and I'm sad and I'm tired of being miserable and sad. And so I've decided to end my life. But if you believe my life has value, and if you believe I can make a difference in this world, then I pray that you would stop my plan. But unless you intervene, uh, tonight is it. I'll be gone. So as I'm praying this prayer, the phone rings. I continue praying, Father, I don't know how you would intervene to stop me, but somehow, if you don't want this to happen, and the phone keeps ringing, if you don't want this to happen, please stop me. And so finally, after a while, I'm like, doggone it, who is interrupting my death prayer? So I'm like, I'm just going to answer this one call, and then I'm going to be right back to my death prayer, Lord. So I answer the call, and it's a woman that I'd only met twice, and I hadn't seen her in weeks. I'd met her months prior, and she said, "Hi, I'm not sure if you remember me, but I met you several months ago, and I remember you saying that today was your birthday." And I'm like, "When did I say that? Why would I have told her that it was going to be my birthday several months?" But okay, because it actually was my birthday. And I said, "Yes,
Wow.
today is my birthday." And she said, "Well, I've thought about you constantly, and so I baked you a cake for your birthday, and I want to know if you'll allow me to come and bring you your cake and share some scriptures with you about how much God loves you."
Wow. Wow.
And initially, I thought, I I don't know this woman. She's coming up here interrupting my death plans. And so, I was in the dorm, so she couldn't just come to my room. She had to call me from the front desk and get permission to come. And so I thought, I have plans tonight. I'm not letting her up here. And then I thought, well, I do like cake. So for the sake of the cake, I will and let this woman come. And so she came, and we got out forks, and we ate the cake, no plates or anything. And she shared with me scripture after scripture after scripture about how much Yahweh loved me, and how he did have plans for my life, and that my life was valuable. She knew nothing of my plans to end it. I had told no one. Um, but I realized that night that the Father himself had reached into my life and had intervened, um, to help me to see another day. And I knew that I needed to walk a path towards him forever. And so I studied the scriptures and studied, and we studied every day for 9 months. We studied together because I had so many questions. And at the end of the day, I had to repent of my bitterness towards people who had hurt me in my lifetime. I had to repent of my pride, my arrogance, my selfishness. And I had to really come to an understanding of who the true and living Yah really was and really is, and not the warped understanding that I had of him, because I understood him as I saw my human father. And so after 9 months of study, I really, it was truly, it takes 9 months to have a baby. It was truly a birth, a rebirth, as I was baptized at the end of that series of Bible studies, and then my life began.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Everything that happened before that was a precursor to life for me, because life was fantastic. And I was at the time a single woman, a college student, and single. And I was dating a guy when I was studying the scriptures, and he was not ready to make a lifelong commitment to follow the scriptures and to live under the Father. And so I had to let go of that relationship, and that was not easy, because his family was family for me. And so
Right.
for me, it was giving up something that was precious to me to gain something, um, sort of sight unseen, that I felt like would be my greater family forever. And so I did. And as a young single, I knew that I had to fall in love with Yahweh and love him as my everything, and be content with him forever, before I could ever know what it was to love a mate. And I wanted to have a husband someday, but I knew I can't be a wife if I can't be a daughter to my Father in heaven first. And so I did things to build my intimacy with the Father. And My mom used to say, "The Lord takes care of babies and fools, and you ain't no baby." So, so I think He really took care of me during those years as we were building intimacy in my relationship with Him. And so I did things like I wanted to go on a date with my daddy, my Father in heaven. And so I said, "Father, I'm a single woman, and so you are my husband. So I want to go on a date with you as my husband. I'd like for you to take me to lunch at my favorite restaurant." And in my mind, He said, "Okay, let's go out to your favorite restaurant." So we went on a lunch date. And I went and I ordered all of my favorite foods from the menu. I got appetizer, an entree, dessert. It was the works. I did not hold back because when my heavenly husband takes me on a date, he spares no expense. So we went to this restaurant and I asked for a table for two. And they thought I was, they're like, "Oh, is someone joining you?" I said, "He's already here." They're like, "Okay, let's put the loony lady next to the window." And so I sat and I quietly hummed hymns to myself and I read scriptures and I felt like I was on a date with him. I felt like we were having our intimate bonding experience. And so the check came and I had not a penny in my pocket.
Oh no.
And I wasn't worried because if my husband's taking me on a date, surely he's going to pay
Yeah.
for it. So I shoved the check to the other side of the table. The waiter sort of looked at me like, "Okay, I don't know what your plan is, but I sure hope somebody's going to show up to pay that check because you've eaten a lot of food today." So the waiter goes away, and I'm sitting there peaceful and content, just waiting for him to pay the bill so we can go. And so the waiter comes back over with a tray of drinks for the table next to me, and he somehow, just as he's standing next to me, loses his balance and spills a Sprite down the back of my jacket, my blazer. And he was so apologetic. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We'll have that dry cleaned for you." It was a dark jacket. You couldn't even see the Sprite. But he said, the manager comes over. He says, "I'm so sorry. To compensate you for this horrible error, we're gonna comp your lunch for you today." And I wanted to say, "I know you will," but instead I said, "Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that." So I left the restaurant. They're like, "Thank you so much, honey, for paying for our lunch." And as I walked away, in my mind, I was holding Yahweh's hand as we were ending our date. And in my mind, I said to him, "Thank you for taking care of lunch. I had a great time." And in my mind, he said back, "I will always take care of you, but don't ever do that again."
Yeah.
And so I did not. But those were the moments.
Having faith to the point of even him paying for your lunch.
Do
That's
not try this at home, folks. That could have gone horribly wrong. So, but it was faith building for me. And because I had to learn intimacy in my walk, and I had to learn what it felt like to be cherished and valued, I needed those experiences. And so, if I may, I'll share one more experience on that journey. I was a student who did not have a way to pay for her education. I was on half scholarship, but at that time, my university was one of the most expensive in the country. It's still one of the most expensive in the country. And so my family, I came from a working class family. My mom was a teacher, my dad, an elementary school teacher. She taught special needs kids. And my dad was a janitor for a coffee company. He worked the midnight shift cleaning coffee off a machine. So my parents didn't have money to send me to an elite school. And so when they dropped me off, my mom said, "I'm giving you $127 and a prayer. Find a way or make a way." And
Oh wow.
it dropped me off in DC. And I don't know if you've spent much time in the nation's capital, but $127 will not go very far. You can spend that on one meal if you wanted. So I ran out of money very quickly, and I was bold. So I went to my congressman and said, "Please pay for my education." And he said, "If you move back to the lovely home state of Florida, I will." And I said, "No, no, I believe this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm not going to go home because I don't believe Yahweh brought me this far to leave me." And he said, "Well, I can't help you with money, but I can get you in a meeting with the president of the university." And so I went into the president's office and I said, "You don't know me, but you want me at your university. And I can't tell you how, but if you arrange for me to be able to stay here, arrange it financially, your campus will be blessed because I'm here." And he was like, "Not sure if you're a little bit loony, but I like you, so I'm going to arrange for you to stay here." And he did. He Each semester I would go to register and they would say there's a hold on your account, you have a balance. I'd go to the president's office and magically the balance would go away. Eventually the president moved on and furthered his career by going into politics, and I was left with no advocate, or so I thought, or so other people thought. And so I went to each of my professors and said, I can't afford to register for classes, but may I attend the class? Because I have faith that by the end of the semester I'll register. And they allowed me to attend. But eventually the semester was coming to a close, and each of my professors said, we can't allow you to sit for the final exam because you're not enrolled in our class. So I was also a resident assistant in the dorms, and my resident director came to me and said, I like you so much, but you can't stay in the dorms if you're not a student. You have until Friday at noon to move out. I had nowhere to go, but I had faith that my Father in heaven would take care of me. And so I refused to pack. And all of my friends from church came over and they're like, are you insane? We're here to move you out. You haven't packed anything. I said, I don't need to pack. My Father is going to work this out. I'm not going anywhere. He did not bring me all the way here to leave me. And they said, she has taken leave of her senses. So we're going to pack up for her. So they're buzzing all around me, packing everything up. My balance was $30,000. I didn't have $30,000. No one I knew had $30,000. And so they're packing, and I keep saying to them, "You all put the boxes down. Let's just chat and have a good time. No sense in packing. My Father is going to work this out." And they're watching their watches. They're like, at noon, campus security is going to come and escort you out of the building. You need to let us move you out. And so I sat there calmly in my armchair as they buzzed all around. And sure enough, at a quarter till noon, my phone rang. And it was the registrar's office saying, your balance has been paid. You can come and register. So I jumped up and hightailed it over and quickly registered for classes. And then I went to student accounts because I wanted to find out who did this? How did this happen? And so the little gentleman behind the computer typed. And he was confused. And he typed, and he was confused. And so he went and got his supervisor, and she typed, and she was confused. And I said, what's going on? And they said, whenever someone pays a bill, it tells us how it was paid. Check, cash, credit card, grant, scholarship. He said, yours just says that your debt is $30,000, and then the next line item says balance, zero. We have no idea how this was paid. And I said, I need a printout of that, please. So they printed me out the balance sheet. I saw it for myself. And they said, no, we don't know what happened. What's going on? I said, you don't need to know. I know what happened. And I walked out. And to this day, I know for certain the Father paid my balance, because no one in my life has ever come forward to say, did you get that $30,000 I sent you? It could only have been the Lord.
Right.
Only. And so I saw Yahweh building my faith all along this journey. And ultimately, he blessed me to go full time in the ministry, leading youth ministries and counseling women. And he blessed me over 7, 8 years. I was full time in the ministry to be able to study the scriptures with hundreds of women and to be able to help hundreds of women come to faith. But there was still a nagging voice inside of me that said, Joy, there's something more. This is not everything. There's something more. And I would think, but I feel full, but not fulfilled. There's something more. And I didn't know what that more was, but he was constantly planting those seeds. So as time went on, we left the full-time ministry. We moved back to Florida to be able to help my family. And I became a teacher, a middle school teacher in the homeschooling community, and had a lovely family in my class that was a family of Messianic Jews. And I remember thinking, Jewish, so that must be a horribly burdensome life to follow all the laws. But this was the most joyful, loving family I had ever met. Every single one of them. And I thought, wow, you follow laws, but you're this happy, you're this joyful. That's so interesting. And so a seed was planted. And as the years went on, scriptures nagged at me, gnawed at me, kept replaying in my mind. Scriptures like, I, the Lord, do not change, so that you, O man, are not destroyed. Scriptures like the Father saying, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in the Christian church, and maybe it's not everyone's experience, but it was my experience that that Yahweh was really presented as two different beings. There was Yahweh of the Old Testament, who was vengeful, wrathful, and mean, and then there was God of the New Testament, who was nice and loving and kind. And yet, the Ruach inside of me said, I, the Lord, do not change. I am the same. And as I studied the Bible with women who would ask me, what about the mean God from the Old Testament? And I would answer with the canned answer that I'd been taught to give about the difference in covenants and such. And yet, inside of me, that quiet voice would say, I am the same, yesterday, today, and forever. And so, my desire to know, okay, what is that voice about, kept nagging at me. And as time went on, a young man pursued me, and we courted and married, and we served in the ministry together, and we had two wonderful children. And that first child was a boy, and I remember, for no good reason at all, just having this overwhelming desire to circumcise him on the 8th day, and no idea where that came from. So I knew this as I was pregnant. It gnawed at me, gnawed at me, gnawed at me, and so I had called every rabbi in town to say, would you do this? And he said, no, we're not. Are you Jewish? No, then we're not doing a bris. Do you know any moils, even a cantor? Do you know anybody who would do this for us? No one knew anybody. And so I finally got to the hospital to have the child, and the doctor came in and said on the 3rd day, and said, oh, okay, it's time for a circumcision. And I said, no, it has to be the 8th day, and I don't have anybody to do it, and I'm all tearful and hormonal. And he said, well, are you Jewish? And I said, no, I'm not Jewish, I'm Christian. And he said, well, I'm Jewish, and I will do this for you. Just let me, give me a few hours. And so after a few hours, he came and got me. And so I go to the little, what I thought was a little surgical suite for him to do this procedure. And I'm crying and holding my little newborn. And he takes the baby, and he said, I'm Jewish, and I want this to be a good experience for you. And so he wore his talits and his tzitzit, and he wore a kippah, and he had brought the hospital rabbi, and they had soft lighting and soft music, and they said the prayers over my son, and and blessed my baby, and did the circumcision there. And I did not know at the time why that was so meaningful for me, but I knew my soul could have no peace if it wasn't done the way that I felt like it. And while I would have loved for it to be the 8th day, it just couldn't be in that circumstance. And so we moved forward. But there were so many moments like that I could not understand why I was so drawn to do something, that I later understood it's because this is what was commanded in the scriptures. And so the spirit inside of me, the Ruach, drew me to the Father in that way. And so as time went on, regrettably, my marriage did not succeed. And in many, many ways, the Father, while it was a very painful experience, I knew that I could not move on unless the Father himself moved me. And ultimately he did. And so I was able to move forward with a clear conscience, knowing that biblically my decision was righteous. And so here I am now, single again. So I always tell people, I've hit the spectrum. I've been single in the Lord, I've been married in the Lord, I've been single mom in the Lord. And so all things to all people I can be, because I've had these experiences, and again, some of them just heart-wrenchingly painful, but all of them, I believe, can be used to help someone else in their walk. And so I had a best friend who just dropped off the radar. I just didn't hear from her for months. And so I called her up and I said, I don't know what's going on with you, but this is not how we behave in our friendship. So I'm coming down to North Carolina to find you and find out what is going on. So I get down there, and she welcomes me in, and she's hemming and hawing, like, where have you been? What is going on? And she's hemming and hawing, and she's like, well, my husband and I are on a different journey, a different path, and I didn't want to feel the rejection. You're my best friend, and sometimes when we tell people that we're on a new path, they reject us because they don't understand it. And I couldn't take that rejection in our relationship, so I just didn't tell you. I'm like, well, are you going to tell me that Buddha is Lord? Are you going to tell me like something weird? Like, what could this path possibly be? And she said, she said, "Well, do you know what Torah is?" And she's taking so long to get it out, and the Lord is still working on my patience. So I said, "Look, I don't know what this thing is that you need to tell me. So let me just tell you what my thing is." I said, more and more I felt compelled to figure out how the whole Bible works together. Because I'm starting to feel like the whole Bible is the whole truth, and the whole Bible is for us all to hold to. I don't know what it is inside of me, but I have no peace. And maybe I'll go check out Jews for Jesus, or maybe I'll try to understand how they wed the Messiah with the Torah. And so then she just starts crying. And I'm like, why are you crying? And she's more tears and more tears. And her husband comes in, why are you making my wife cry? I'm not going to do anything to her. And so then ultimately she dries the tears, and she tells me about their journey in Torah. And as always, my response is, I don't know about all of that, but I know the scriptures are true and they are right. And if it says it in the scriptures, it's how I want to live my life. And so she gave me a few resources and sent me off on my own to figure it out. And I spent a year trying to learn how to walk in Torah by myself, just reading the scriptures and reading as many articles and resources. And I would call her with questions, and she wouldn't answer my questions. But all of that was in the Father's plan, because He knows that there's been so much confused doctrine by people, humans, getting in and perverting the gospel,
Right.
that if I don't see it in the scriptures myself, it's um, it's not my faith, and I can't just do something because somebody else told me it was right. I have to see it in the scriptures, and I've got to see what this walk looks like for me, and to know that it's the Father leading it. And so in the course of that, I began to pray that Yahweh would give me a partner to walk out these scriptures and to live this life, and that He would, my children have a dad, but that He would give them a father in the household to love them and to demonstrate the qualities of the Father alive in their lives every day. And so a friend that I had not talked to in a decade reached out to me on Facebook, and she inboxed me, and she said, "Are you dating anyone?" And I said, "No, no one to speak of." And she responded, she said, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry. The things didn't work out in your marriage." And I said, "But do you happen to know someone fantastic that I could date, fall in love with, and marry?" And she said, "I don't know, but there's this guy who goes to my church who seems kind of great. Let me check him out for you, and I'll let you know." And shortly thereafter, she set us up on a blind date, and that is how we met.
Okay. So, thank you. So for me, I'm a bit of a miracle too. Um, my mom had two boys early. They were 19 and 17 years older than me before I was even born. And the doctors, back then decided, well, we're going to want to stop her from having babies as well. So for her, it was they did a wire mesh and try to burn her uterus. And I'm sorry, this little maybe a little too technical, but to so she wouldn't have a baby. But here I am, you know, uh, here I am. So that didn't take. But that's really just the beginning of the miracle and the blessing and the testimony for my life, because I was born with three holes in my heart. Now, actually, a lot of people born with holes in the heart, and generally they all close up, and it's no big thing. Much ado about nothing. But for my three holes, they did not close. So I had a heart surgery, my first heart surgery when I was 4 years old, to patch up those holes, and I had a valve that was leaking. But other than that, everything was pretty normal. I mean, relatively normal. My mom also struggled with uh, drug abuse, and we love her, and she overcame those demons. Um, but there some things in the course of life happened that were very, very hurtful, and and caused me to become very distant, independent from people. Um, during that After that heart surgery, while still in the hospital, um, my mom left me. She left me in the hospital. Uh, I remember, like, I don't have a lot of memories from my early childhood, but one very, very vivid memory is me laying in my hospital bed, and my mom, and it was dark, and my mom saying that she's going to leave, and I cried, and I cried, and I begged. I said, "Mom, please don't leave, please don't leave, please don't leave, don't leave." There's no one else there. No, my brothers were off living their life, and I don't know where my dad was. Not to say my dad's a great guy. We have a great relationship, but he just wasn't there that night. Um, and she left while I was screaming, calling her name. She left me. So we had our challenges, um, and the heart problems didn't stop, and the big problem, and the one that hurt. I don't know what to call it, but I am blessed, and I am protected. My cousin, a kid I grew up, someone I played in the sandbox with, had the same exact surgery, and and he didn't make it. And it was tough because that aunt, I was very very close to that aunt, uncle, and their older son Ruben, and you know, and that kid didn't that he didn't make it with the same surgery. So you fast forward a few more years, and you get and that same leaking valve that they had to sort of patch, that same leaking valve stopped closing. So if anyone knows anything about valves and pressure and whatnot, you have two valves. The fluid gets in there, the blood gets in there. One valve doesn't close all the way. The pressure causes the blood to go backwards, and it's called mitral valve regurg. So at 11 years old, I had a heart larger than an adult male's because of this. Now, I knew. I mean, obviously, I have a nice, gnarly scar here. So, I know I have heart problems, and I know my mom is hypersensitive to anything to do with the heart. And the last thing I want to do is have anything get away with me playing basketball. Can't get away because I was one of those kids. Before school, during school, after school, ball, ball, ball. So I would have these little chest pains, and I would just rub them. My mom said, "Well, what's going on?" So I was like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry. It's just heartburn. It's just heartburn. I'm 11 years old, heartburn. Of course, So I did that a few too many times in front of my mom, and she says, "No, something's wrong." So we go to a doctor, test after test after test, they find out that heart valve, that it wasn't closing, and that I need to get an artificial heart valve put in. So every once in a while, if you're standing close enough and if it's quiet enough, you can actually hear my heart tick. And that ended any hopes of basketball career or anything going past that. But I am a two-time survivor of heart surgeries. Now, I skipped one little part because of the miracle of my birth, because she was never supposed to have another kid. My mother, you know, the day she raised me Catholic. She was Catholic at the time. The 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 day out I got out of the hospital, she took me to her nearest Catholic church, and in her heart, she took me before that altar and lifted me up to God, lifted me up to Yahweh, and said, "He is yours." So I've definitely sort of grown up with that, though I've been a wild child at times, with that, you know, I belong to God type of, and I want to be used by God type of mentality. And it really has served me well, and I thank the Father for that submission. Even though I didn't know this till later on, I thank for that, because basically what happened was, even though I grew up in the Catholic Church, at 16 I was presented with the Bible saying, one thing that about my wife and I, this we belonged. At one point to the same family of churches. She joined the church in D.C. and led the ministry in Baltimore. I was in Los Angeles, and I was presented with, repentance and baptism, with a fuller knowledge of the scriptures, and I was like, oh, okay, so getting baptized that baby, that's not, that's not legitimate, or praying to saints and the Virgin Mary, that's not, in the scriptures. Okay, fine, all right. So it was tough for my mom and my brothers for me to leave the Catholic Church, but it was there, right there in the scriptures. So that's what you got to do. That's what I chose to do, and I was baptized at 16. Um, um, you know, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm grateful for what God has put in my heart throughout my life. The tough times, weren't just me being left in the hospital, but also we were homeless. Um, and my mom lost her job, and the finances weren't there, so we had to stay in a homeless shelter for a few months till we got some help. Um, but it just happened to be 14 blocks away from the beach. So what should have been a depressing time, I'm homeless and me being mad, or like, hey, I get to go to the beach every day. All I gotta do is walk 14 blocks, and by the time I walk back, I'm good and dry. It was a perfect situation. And I think about, I hear my wife's very amazing story, and and I think about my life, and even all of our lives, and it's so amazing how Yahweh protects our hearts, protects our innocence, especially as children, so that we we don't have to feel what as the how challenging things are, how challenging an adult would see our circumstances. So anyhow, moving forward, I joined the church, and I go to college, and I also joined the full time ministry as a youth minister. But the one challenge with the church we were a part of is that it was very controlled. Uh, it was very much a system that told you what to believe. It was the type of place that they have. If they want to sit down with a brother, they're going to think of what that brother needs, and then go find a few scriptures that they feel can make that point.
Uh,
So I mean, at least to say a bit manipulative. Um, and I was involved in it, and I went I went head first, all out, and ultimately got bitter and resentful. I made a couple major choices based off of what that leadership wanted me to do, and ultimately I left the church. And I just didn't leave the church, man. I got to be completely honest. I left God, because in my mind, in my immature mind at that point was, you put those leaders in front of me. I'm trusting those leaders. The Bible says to obey your leaders. There's a scripture there, and I did that, and I got kicked out of school. My relationship with my family deteriorated. I didn't know my little sisters, and finances were horrible. And so I eventually had to take responsibility for my actions. I had to take responsibility for my choices. I had to take responsibility for the fact that I did not take the time out to do what to do to do according to the scriptures, according to what the Father told me in the scriptures, and I was following man. So, but and in that time, I wowed out. I was a pretty good kid. I wasn't running the streets in high school. In college, I'm a youth minister, so I had been protected from a lot of that lifestyle, and I decided to get fully involved in that lifestyle, and with everything that came from it. Drunk, type of guy that I would be waking up on somebody's floor, my floor, somebody's bathroom floor from drinking too much. Um, just not good. And and everything that goes along with that lifestyle, the immorality and the impurity. Um, and after a good 6, 7 years of this, I took stock, and I said, this is not who I'm supposed to be. This I don't know who I am, but I know this isn't it. So after praying and praying and fasting, I decided, okay, I got to get out of LA. That was so I made the move to Texas. Texas, okay, and it was great because it put so much more responsibility on myself, and I couldn't just hang with my friends. I had to, figure out who I was, and I figured out some things. That, got bought a car, and went back to school, um, and decided, okay, I'm going to go to pharmacy school. All right, but I'm going to go to pharmacy school, but I'm also going to recommit myself to the Father as I understood it. I joined the same family of churches because though I went to a couple different Christian denominations, I felt that church was good, was where I wanted to be. Um, so I recommitted myself, and I went to pharmacy school in Maryland, Maryland Eastern Shore, and it was tough. It was tough because though I was doing what I thought was right, I didn't have the there's something more, but I knew that I wasn't fulfilling that full potential. for myself. So anyhow, I'm in pharmacy school, and I am a part of a congregation where a woman, her friend from she hadn't seen in a decade, uh, said, "Hey, I really want to set you up on a date." So we go on a date, and it's great. We had a great time. We talked. We both brought a friend. I brought one of my fellas, and she brought one of her female friends, and they didn't say 5 words. Outside, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm great. Where you from? And that was it. The next 2.5 hours was us just talking and talking, getting to know each other, and it was the best time. I had always prayed, even though after that day I wasn't thinking this is gonna be my next wife,
Next.
my wife. I'm sorry, my wife, because there's only one, only one. Um, we didn't walk. We both didn't walk away. That was our spouse. But what I cherished was that I felt comfortable around Joy, and I felt like I can talk to her. I had always wanted, even though I did not always follow this rule, I always wanted to be friends first. Because in my at that time, I believe what you hear is, the ups and downs of marriage, and if without that foundation of friendship, that you actually enjoy spending time with just that person with nothing else going on, um, it can be challenging. So I was able to develop a friendship with this woman. So we went on this date.
But still, we were not thinking any romantic
Romantic, nothing yet.
anything,
So it wasn't romantic,
but a great
but a
friendship.
great friendship. Like, so I went back, and she brought me this cool little coffee mug, and we talked about how Panera was our favorite place to study, because she had already finished law school by then, and was working and all that stuff, and I was in the middle of pharmacy school. Um, so I would text her, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Just thinking about you, and just she felt she was a safe place for me. That's what I'm trying to say. She was a safe place where I could just talk. I didn't feel ulterior motives and all that stuff. So we so we did that. We chopped it up, and we kept talking about a second date. Kept talking about a second date. I was gonna escort her to a gala, but I had to run back home to take care of my mom, and that sort of brings us to what really did put us on this path. So my mom, unfortunately, developed Alzheimer's, and she was a trooper. The average life, when someone develops Alzheimer's is 10 years, and my mom lasted 13.
Well,
So she was a trooper, um, and but she did eventually pass. Um, so I living in Delaware at the time, I flew myself and my grandmother. I brought my grandmother out to live with me because she was going through some challenges. So we flew back out to LA to attend to the memorial service and to organize that. And I had a few friends from across the way, just sending thank you cards and things like that. But this woman right here, I could not get her off my mind. And it was I was unexpected because we were just friends. That was my friend Joy, but I couldn't get her off my mind. And I'm standing on my aunt's porch. I'm telling my aunt, like, I don't get it, Aunt Joanne. I don't get it. I can't stop thinking about her. What's going on? So I'm on that porch and said, well, I just gotta call her. So I whip out the phone, I give her a call, and this is another thing, is like, this particular area is one of those dead zones. You can't get unless you have one particular carrier, which I did not have. You cannot get a reception in or around her home. And I have a full length conversation with Joy, and I say, hey, just thank you so much for your words. Thank you for the message you left me. I really appreciate your friendship. So we scheduled a date, and this is
and
yes.
what he did not know is I always say that the father went to a lot of trouble to get us together. And that I feel like this union is specifically engineered by him. The circumstances in our lives, like as he said, we were in the same family of churches, but he was on one coast and I was on the opposite coast. So, and in fact, I was in Florida initially. And so the father had to move him across the country and me all the way up the coast to get us in the same place so that we were still living in different states. He was in Delaware and I was a few hours away in Maryland. Um, in order for us to begin this lifelong walk together. And as he said, he was away and couldn't stop thinking about me. We've timed it out and realized that it was that exact same week, within those same couple days, that I woke up and could not stop thinking about him. And it was
Wow.
irrational to me that he would be on my mind so much because we hadn't talked for a few months. He was building a relationship with someone else and I was getting to know someone else, and ultimately neither of those things worked out. And we could not at the same time stop thinking about each other. And I believe all of that was Elohim's doing to get us into this particular union and on this particular faith walk together.
So during that phone call, I say I really want to hang out with you. So she says, okay, I'm coming up there in a couple weeks. So let's do it. So we set this date, and this is our aha moment, our reconnection day, our aha versary, where where she drove up to Delaware. She went over
To
that
spend
friend.
time with my girlfriend, not because I was chasing him, to clarify.
Okay. And I picked her up from that girlfriend's house, and I'm telling you, if you want to talk about if you fireworks, sparks, doves being released, a blinding light coming from behind her, and all of that, I opened up that door and my jaw just about hit the floor. And I took her out to a Thai restaurant, which just happens to be her favorite her favorite type of food. I made sure we got a nice table reserved just for the two of us, and we caught up. We caught up just from where we left off, and just and our conversations. I have not met another human being with which I can talk about the full gambit of life than with this woman. So, and that was really it. I mean, we went on a date, and there's a couple other things happened. She came out for a barbecue of mine, and we chopped it up there. And honestly, so if you do the first date, a few conversations in between via text, then this aha date, 2 weeks later we're at my house with a barbecue, and so I'm coming. She told me she's gonna come to barbecue, and she said, so what are your side dishes? And I'm like, side, and this is for the guys, side dishes. What are you talking about? I'm gonna have some hamburgers, some hot dogs, and some buns. That's what we do. And long story short, she ran the barbecue. But in the midst of that, we sat down, and a couple dates in, I said, this is what I'm looking for. These are my quote unquote deal breakers. This is what, well, she gave me the same. We went back and forth. We had a very, very deep conversation because I knew that at the very least, I needed to see this through. That this wasn't just going to be a casual friendship. This wasn't going to be a casual relationship. That she can very well be it for me. So we did that, and we started dating a few weeks later, and then we get to uh, Torah, and that same friend that started her on her path. Yes, I'm sorry.
I told him during our courtship about my journey in Torah, and he was hesitant. He had to take a couple days to pray about that, and then he came back and he said, "I will study the scriptures for myself, and we'll see what I come to."
But before that, or somewhere around that, we went down to
Yes,
Fayetteville.
after that,
Came down to Fayetteville. That same girlfriend of hers and their family.
they
So
host a home fellowship.
and so I'm at my first Shabbat service, and yeah, I don't know why it happens so much, but anything Old Testament, anything Torah is just so for me, and because you don't see the grace and you don't see everything else. So anyhow, we go down there, and I have a couple things going on with some people there, and I have a couple beefs, and I'm going back and forth with a couple people, and in my pride, so we have the service, and I'm very hesitant. I come back to pick her up the next morning. I stay in the hotel. She stayed there at the house, and I she gets in the car, and I very as calmly as I can. I say, um, is this something that you were thinking about doing, or is this something that you've decided to do? She, confidently says something I've decided. So I told her, okay, well, if I disagree that this is not what it is, what I need, then this will end our pursuit, and we will just be friends, because I didn't believe in. I knew that something like this, you don't want to. Your house divided cannot stand, and do not be unequally yoked, and things like that. She had to count the cost because she because she chose Yahweh, and she chose a relationship with Yahweh. So yeah.
So when we're in the car and we're having that conversation, it was it was very early in the morning when he picked me up, so it was still dark out. And he said to me, is this something you've decided to do? And I said, I've decided. And when he said, because you know that if I determine that this is not the right path for me, it will necessarily end our relationship because a house divided cannot stand. And I said, yes, I understand that. And I was so glad it was dark because I did not want him to know that I was boo-hoo crying. So tears are just streaming down my face. So I'm sitting in the car with tears streaming down my face because I'm thinking this is the third time that I may have to give up the man that I love. I broke up with my college boyfriend in order to become a Christian, and then my marriage did not succeed, and now I'm sitting here with this guy who I really feel like could be my husband someday, and again I may have to make a choice between the man that I think I love and the Elohim whom I know loves me.
Right.
And as a single woman, that can be a very difficult choice to make. You would want it not to be. You would think, oh, it's obvious. You always choose God. But that loneliness can be real and profound. And, I am very young, very, very young. But I've been very young for a long time. And so the longer you go in life and, in the circumstance I was in where, I have 2 children, it can be more difficult to find a mate and one with whom you are compatible. And so in that moment, I realized that yet again, my father was asking me to make a choice, that I would choose him even if it meant losing the man I thought I loved or could love. And so what ensued next, I was ready to make that choice. What ensued next, though, is really how we fell in love.
And so leaving that Shabbat service in North Carolina, the Mosleys gave us a few resources. Check out 119 Ministries, a particular study series called Pauline Paradox, a video called Truth or Tradition, and a few different things that we study. So we get back home. I'm in Delaware, she's in Maryland, and we wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get on the computer, get on Google Hangouts, and go through these studies and make notes. I mean, the joke is it will take us 3 days to get through 1 hour long lesson because we're stopping, we're looking at notes, we're looking up other resources, we're diving into the scriptures, and we're diving in to answer these questions. A lot for me, and also some for Joy, but it was amazing because what I always wanted is we fell in love over the scriptures. There's a scripture, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it references that the husband will wash his wife in the word. And I was able to do that, and we were able to do that, really just bathe each other in the word through these studies. And it really was those studies and us seeing each other's heart, us just seeing each other's heart for God, where we really fell in love. So after that, we study. After probably maybe about a month or so of these, I was like, okay, I get it. Now for me, I feel like I'm the type of person that if you show me in the scriptures, it's done. I've been in that environment where people told me what my faith was, so I know to look out for that. And I know not just to accept whatever someone says, but I have to see it in the scriptures. And it was seeing the scriptures like I am the same. I'm not a man that for me to change my mind. And seeing really, and what did it for me, it was going through the 613 commandments and seeing how Yeshua in his mission was being obedient to the scriptures. He wasn't, yes, he's full of grace, and the grace has always been there, but seeing that connection, and for me it was a wrap at that point. So for a while I tried going to the church and being observant. That eventually changed as well, but that's what it was. So we continued to date. And we got engaged. We started our aha date was in March. We were married in November of the same year, and it was amazing.
In preparing for marriage. So it was actually not even quite 3 months after that aha-versary that he got down on one knee and proposed marriage. And as he said, we always say that we fell in love over the scriptures because as we drew closer to the Father, we drew closer to one another. And it was just so clear to us. We never had any doubt that this, like we often look at each other and say, it could only have been you. Our particular set of circumstances, our particular faith, it could only have been him. And so with neither of us having grown up in intact families, we knew that we had to do something different. We couldn't follow the pattern that our parents followed, and we didn't know all that many people with great marriages. We knew married people. We didn't know a lot of people with great marriages, and we wanted our marriage to glorify Elohim. We wanted our marriage to be great, and so we said, okay, we'd always been told that the man leads the household, but what does that mean? How do you know how to lead? And so we looked into the scriptures, and we realized that as a dating couple, we said, Jarjeet wants to lead in all the same ways that Yeshua led. He led in love, he led in faith, he led in service, and he led in humility. And so going into our marriage, Jarjeet was determined and fulfills that promise to this very hour that he leads our family in love, in faith, in service, and in humility. And because he leads that way, it is my pleasure to submit. But he never sees me as, he always says, you're not my helpmate. You're not my helpmate. You are, what's the word you use?
Well, counterpart, compliment, like counterpart, comment. Like it was important to me to not come into a situation, not come to a marriage, pointing the finger and telling her, you do this, you do that. I didn't believe in that. I don't think the scriptures really support that. We submit to one another as Christ, and that side, that rib, we see in Genesis 2, it wasn't just a rib, it was a side. The Lord split Adam, split Adam. He was complete by himself, and he split Adam. So she complements me. My strengths are her weaknesses. Her strengths are my weaknesses. We can't max out our potential without the two of us together working together. So yeah, it was important to me that I chose, and I'm committed to seeing her as my counterpart, as my complement, because we're two parts that make a whole. And I think what maybe she was going to say. So yeah.
So as we walk out this journey in life, and in love, and in Torah, I have to honestly say that our marriage is a joy. It is happy. Now, yes, we've only been married for almost 2 years, so we're still newlyweds. We always say we're going to honeymoon for the first 10 years, and then we'll be newlyweds. But our marriage is a joy because our life in Elohim is a joy. And it's not that we don't face challenges, but whatever we face them together as a team and as a unit. And be it our observance of Shabbat or the feast days or just time at home with our family, every day in this walk with each other is a joy and a pleasure. And we really do feel humbled and honored that Yahweh has allowed us to be at this point in our lives and in our love.
So I think, I think that's a perfect way to end that one. And we want to also say thank you so much. We are honored and humbled for this invitation to share our testimony.
Thank y'all very much for being on here. We're humbled to have you, because when I heard y'all's story the other morning, I was just blown away. And I know that there will be many other people that will be the exact same way.
Thank you.
So there will be a ton of people that will be encouraged by this, and may all glory go to the Father.
Amen. All right.
Thank y'all. Shalom.
Shalom.